Well, hi once again. This is Mike Hinkson, and I want to welcome you to another edition of Unstoppable Mindset, where inclusion, diversity, and the unexpected meet. And our guest, Matthew Burr, certainly has lots of experience with the unexpected. He has been in the HR profession for 16 years. He's done a lot of teaching. He's done a lot of consulting, has amassed a great amount of expertise, and I'm going to let him talk more about that than me doing it, because he's the guy who should know. So Matthew, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. We're really glad you're here.
Yeah, Michael, again, appreciate you having me on your podcast, and always happy to join and answer any questions and tell any crazy stories I've dealt with over the last 16, almost 17 years. It'll be 17 years in December. Started my consulting company 8 years ago in October, so October of 2015, and really like to support any organization, small organization, up to medium size on the HR front, and help, businesses really align HR strategy to the needs of their organization, and watch leaders grow and evolve and become very, very well versed in the employee relations, and making sure we're doing everything compliant as well.
Works for me, needless to say. Well, why don't we start maybe going back a little further and tell us kind of about the early Matthew growing up, and why you ended up where you were and that kind of thing, because something had to start that process. But you started out as a kid like the rest of us, and tell me about that.
Yeah, started out really, I came from Logan, Utah, right north of Logan, Utah. I grew up there for 14 years, and then made the decision to leave home when I was 14 years old and move across the country, and realized really going down, I think, a bad path in life, not making the best decisions. My parents separated early on in life, and didn't have a great relationship with either of them, and was able to make the decision and come back to upstate New York and live with family when I was 15 and finish out high school. And from there went on to college, and I think struggled in the beginning, right? I didn't do great in college. And ironically now they let me teach at these schools after having a few bad semesters. I'll just put it that way. But again, just kind of finding my footing, early on in life, in the, early 2000s, 2001, 2002, didn't really know what I was going to do. Decided to relocate to Phoenix for a little while, then moved back to Utah. Worked in a call center for, 6 or 7 months, and realized that the academic path was probably the right place for me to be. I realized there was more, I think there was a calling to get back in and finish the academic side, and decided to return to New York, and finished my associate's degree at a community college, went on to get my bachelor's degree. And while I was an undergraduate, decided to pursue an HR internship, and have stayed in the career field ever since, and really been able to grow into a professional. And again, my education really hasn't stopped. I'm recently completing a Lean Six Sigma black belt as well. Actually tonight's the last class on that. So I've really been in college and in certifications on and off, probably for the past 22 years, just trying to upskill myself and do what I can do to make a difference in the academic world, and also in the consulting world. So I do teach part-time as well, at a number of schools as an adjunct professor. Truly enjoy that. I was a full-time professor for 5 years, retired from that field, and was able to continue doing some teaching part-time online. I do a lot of travel now and live out of state in Texas at times from New York. So teaching in a classroom gets incredibly complicated when you travel like that. So played football, golf when I was younger, baseball as well. Spent a lot of time in the weight room, and trying to just keep myself mentally sane, dealing with some of the craziness, that I deal with on the HR front. But it's been a great life. I wouldn't ask for anything different. Challenges and really blessed. I live a blessed life, which I'm appreciative of. So,
well, that certainly is cool by any standard. What got you from college then to go into HR? I know you started out as an intern in a valve manufacturing company and so on. Was that HR, or what got you into that?
Yeah, so when I was a senior at Elmira College, there was a requirement to to complete an internship. And I was lucky enough, and really interviewed well to get that internship in the industrial relations department, which is your HR department. It's an old school word for HR. My grandfather actually worked there for 35 years as an electrician. So being able to work in the same facility with some of the same people he worked with was a very unique experience. And during that internship, I had taken a Myers-Briggs test, personality test in one of my classes, and HR, attorney, marketing manager, and financial advisor all came up with my personality the personality that aligned with the career. And I was already doing the internship in HR, looked at the other fields, and really stuck with this one. I did apply to law school in 2014, 2015, was waitlisted at a number of schools, and was unsuccessful at getting admitted, but I've had a good ride in the HR field. So really the internship and then the personality test kind of set me on the path to success in the HR field at this point.
Well, and looking at your bio, though, you clearly have, and it makes perfect sense to have a knowledge or some knowledge of HR law and being able to be conversant in that, whether you're actually a certified real degreed or whatever lawyer, you still have a lot of knowledge that you've gained over the years about that. And I assume that has helped a lot.
Yeah, and I did. I do have 3 master's degrees, and the last one was a master's degree in jurisprudence, labor, and employment law through Tulane. It's not a JD, but it is a master's degree in specific HR law, which has been helpful. I mean, it's an area that I've specialized in really throughout my career and understanding it in detail. The laws change across the country, even state and local wide on the HR front, I would say in certain states daily. So it's an area you've got to be well versed in. But yeah, absolutely. And I work closely with a lot of attorneys in the work that I do. And I've always been interested in the law, labor law, employment law. So it was really a natural fit. I'm happy to have that knowledge, and it's continuous education as things evolve for sure. So,
well, how do you define HR in the HR world? I suppose there are probably a lot of different ways to describe it, but how would you describe HR?
I see it as an evolving area in many organizations where I think it was seen as much more administrative, benefit enrollment, hire people, fire people, your new hire paperwork, the employee handbook, maybe some training, to much more strategic, where we're helping align really HR departments with the needs of the organization, looking at HR business partners, strategic partners, and helping drive business solutions through the human resources department. That's where I see it going. I think we have a long way to go as a profession. I think that HR, the profession in general, needs to understand, finances and operations, customer service, and the internal workings of an organization as you evolve into a more seasoned strategic professional. But yeah, it's gone from much more transactional type of work to much more strategic. So, but that's where I see it going. And again, there's always, I think, areas of opportunity improvement for any HR professional or any department to look at based on the needs of the organization. So,
yeah. Well, and obviously that can even be a moving target depending on what the organization is doing or how it's evolving as well.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, definitely. And again, I think one of the key focuses recently has obviously been on the Great Resignation. People, the turnover rates around the world have been astronomical. And how do we continue to maintain internal growth, succession planning when people are changing jobs every 12 to 24 months or less at this point, right? And, again, I think mental health has become a big deal as well. I think we've had a lot of challenges with that in the workplace, the culture, the communication, all those areas. I think HR plays an intricate role in helping drive strategy on and helping evolving based on the needs of, the business, the workforce, and really the consumer as well. So,
what do you think about this whole concept and phenomena that we're experiencing now, where people change jobs every 12 to 24 months? It didn't used to be that way. Why has it shifted to doing that? And is that necessarily a good thing? Or how valuable would it be if we got back to more of a mindset where people stayed at one place longer?
And I was talking about this yesterday with another person, and I mentioned a study I'd read. That the study out of Europe said Gen Z is going to change jobs or change careers potentially 30 times throughout their career lifespan. Right? I mean, that's a huge number at this point. You think about it. You're changing jobs every 12 to 15 months. Yeah, I think there's value in churn in organizations, in turnover related to bringing in fresh ideas, fresh blood, not looking at the way we've always operated. I think that it does, it is harmful to organizations if we're having 80-90% turnover every 12 or 20 months. There's problems in an organization, right? But I think if we can show the value in growing succession planning, developing internal talent, and get that communication out to the workforce, you are going to have opportunities to recruit and retain. Look, from a longevity standpoint, I think if you can retain talent, you can bring the right people in and grow talent, you're ahead of the competition, because I think that's an area that most businesses struggle with right now. And so how do we do that? How do we make sure people are empowered, engaged? It's discussions I think most organizations around the world are having at this point.
Why do you think we've migrated toward this kind of a situation as opposed to people staying at companies a whole lot longer?
Well, I mean, you got to, pension plans are pretty much gone at this point. I think those were big. I mean, I think the retiree benefits and things like that used to be offered at major corporations are non-existent anymore. I think that plays a role in it. I think the loyalty factor to an extent is gone, but I also think people are looking for promotional opportunities and growth. And I think we've got to be able to sell that internal in organizations to show there is a path to growth, a path to success, if you're willing to take on the challenge and do the hard work to get there. Again, I think that is one area. I also think that organizations at times struggle with disengagement. I think people become bored in roles. I think we have communication issues, decision-making inconsistencies. The psychological workplace contract, I think, has evolved at this point. Again, do people want hybrid or remote work jobs? Are we offering that as an organization? Those are all questions I think that every organization has to look at and figure out what works best for them and how do we recruit and retain talent. I think, a lot of times what it comes down to in what I do as a consultant at the end of the day is workplace communication. It seems like we're lacking there. Leadership, I think conflict management, leadership decision-making is another one. Consistent accountability is another thing as well. The accountability factor is another area to think about there too. Again, I think the equity of processes and policies internal is another thing to take a look at. I mean, all those things I think play a role in the churn and dissatisfaction at times in the workplace. And I think if you can get your hands around those as an organization, you're going to be in a much better position, to be competitive and recruit and retain people.
Yeah. This year, maybe I am misassessing, but it seems to me that we're finding more groups striking than I've seen in quite a while. Is it just kind of coincidence that we've had like the writers and the actors and United Auto Workers? I don't know are they still planning a strike, or did they come to an agreement? And then hotel workers, and there are others. Seeing a lot more people in essentially unionizing kind of environments are striking more than I think we've had in the past. Does that really hold true, or am I misassessing that?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that, one thing I will say about it is labor does have the advantage to an extent, for sure. I mean, I think there is absolute the labor and union or non-union. I think people know they have the advantage because there are so many job openings. There is a need for workers. And frankly, I mean, again, some of the settlements, some of these other unions have gotten pilots, I think, the railroad workers have really set the bar pretty high. And the UAW coming in out wanting like a 50% pay increase, 32-hour work week. So, UPS also, I mean, I don't want to forget the Teamsters and UPS. That was another major settlement for labor at this point. So you've seen some significant settlements related to this. And so, again, I think that, I mean, you see strikes. Starbucks is another one at this point.
Yeah.
We've seen it, but I think that labor has the advantage across the world, and people know that it's not just strikes in this country. There's strikes globally at this point as well. So
yeah, well, and again, I'm not saying that they're bad in any way, shape, or form, but I just noticed that there seems to be an increase. Well, look what's going on in France. They're irate over changing the retirement age from 62 to 64.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and some of those strikes, and we haven't seen. I mean, there's been some strikes, but the UAW has not struck yet. Teamsters didn't strike, pilots didn't. Pilots did some. I think I'd call some work slowdowns and things like that. There was some picketing. But some of that stuff globally really has gotten pretty violent. I mean, it is a complicated time between labor and management, and obviously labor and government as well. So,
well, how do HR departments and leaders in HR, and I think leadership is something well worth talking about, but how do they help influence or shape policies in companies? Or how can they, and do company leaders really listen to HR?
I mean, again, and it comes down to: have you earned a seat at the table within your organization, whether it's a non-for-profit or a government agency or even a major Fortune 500, right? I mean, do you have the credibility to walk in and make those decisions and help guide that policy? Yeah, I mean, I think that every HR professional should strive to do that. I think people need to be well versed, again, on the business side, on the people side. Number one, people side. Number two, business side. And then a close number three is obviously the labor and employment law side as well. So all those things play a role in helping drive and dictate policy and strategy. But you've got to understand it in detail. I mean, you really do have to be a business-centric HR person to help drive those, and as well have the people and soft skill. The human side of it is critically important as well, the psychological side. But I mean, again, a lot of those policies and procedures and decisions and processes are going to be dictated on the legal side as well. So you've got to be well-versed in that component as well. A lot of times you see, and again, I've done work with labor unions for years at this point. A lot of times what happens is you see the labor relations and the contract negotiations farmed out to attorneys. I mean, I've never even thought about doing that as an HR professional that does labor. I mean, but most places have gotten away from having HR people manage labor negotiations and labor contracts, which I think is not a great sign. I think that HR people need to be versed in those things to be effective in their careers. So,
well, it seems to me that good HR people have a gift or a strength of being able to relate to people, the people that they serve, which is, of course, a lot of different aspects of a company. But if you farm things out, you're losing or giving up that whole ability to establish and maintain the relationships that you really need to have.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, it comes down to relationships and really maneuvering to get things done. You have to have the relationships with the employees. You have to have the relationships with the management team as well. No, and with the union. I mean, if we're talking, labor at that point, you've got to have the third party relationship at this point too. So definitely.
Well, I know you talk about strategic leadership. What is that exactly?
I mean, again, I think it's driving organization. It's driving strategy, right? It's looking at the 3 to 5 year process for the organization, helping understand, making business decisions based on the needs of the organization and the workforce. I think it's looking and saying, okay, where do we need to innovate? Where do we need to change? Mission, vision, values, really understanding the financial components, helping budget and then relating it back to HR. I mean, and again, I think there is strong alignment with HR strategy and the needs of the organization if you're able to turn the HR department into more of a strategic, I would say, partner at this point in organizations, which I think the career field is still evolving. So,
yeah, and it's a process, needless to say. Well, one of the things I've thought about, and I know in some of our discussions, I think we've touched on it maybe even before today, but anyone who's a professional at a company, would you view them, or would you think that the best mindset that they could really adopt would be to consider themselves a consultant, to be able to advise and to help and whatever else is implied by being a consultant?
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's the book I wrote about HR consulting, Unbox Your HR Career. Really, it's driven, and the book itself is prefaced on how to build an HR consulting company, like bootstrap it from scratch at this point. But one of the messages I talk to HR professionals about in some of the speaking engagements that I do on this topic is you've got to look at yourself as an internal consultant, right? What's your return on investment from an HR department standpoint for the organization? What value are you adding to the organization? How are you effective? Are you measuring your effectiveness? Are you seeking feedback? Can you show us some wins and losses? And that's the type of thing you got to look at. I think if you look at your job as an internal consultant, or even looking at it as an external consultant, those are things you can do to truly, I think, evolve your HR career, your HR department, and really make a major difference at the end of the day for any organization. And eventually you might become a consultant after that, where you're like, okay, I can do this and I can do it for many organizations. And I think that if people look at that really as a strategic partner, a consultant, like a decision maker, or, trying to establish that relationship within the relationships within the organization, I think the sky's the limit. I think that, again, you're going to understand the needs of not only the workforce, the needs of the business, but also the needs of the consumer or patron or customer, whatever that might be, community as well. So,
well, the other aspect of that, it seems to me, is it goes beyond HR. I think that anyone who really is involved in a company, no matter what their job, could view their position, or maybe ought to view their job and position as being a consultant. And that implies in part that you have expertise that you can share and should share. And if you're doing it well, then other people appreciate you sharing and providing your knowledge.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think that with that, if you're looking at it from that lens and you're saying, okay, what's the return on investment for my services? How am I making a difference, in the organization, the community, and the world? I think you're going to look at things a lot differently. And again, I think part of that goes back to, and it's some of the coaching that I do with executive coaching I do on the side with managers, is looking at like an internal SWOT analysis of yourself. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Where are your opportunities? And where are your threats, both personally and professionally? And I think as you piecemeal that together, kind of map that out on a SWOT analysis type diagram, you're going to see, again, where you're a subject matter expert in and where you might need to improve. And I think that as you evolve your skill set, your emotional intelligence, you're going to see a major difference, not only in your professional life, but also your personal life as well. So,
yeah, I think that's really it. It does filter into both. And the bottom line is, if you really look at it that way and you analyze what you're doing and how it's being received, then you have questions you can answer. If you feel it's not being received well, why? If it is being received well, that's great. And how could you maybe even do it better, and so on. But those are the kinds of things that, especially if you discover that you're truly being successful, might, going back to what we discussed earlier, help lead you towards staying somewhere where you're successful.
Yeah. And look, I mean, with anything in life, I think you've got to recognize we're going to make mistakes. Fail forward is a term that I like to use. finding opportunities, looking at ways to evolve your own skill set, looking at ways that you need to change personally and professionally. And as I think you get into that mindset of continuous growth, kind of being obsessed with doing things better, getting yourself in a better position. Again, I think it just spills over into everything. Discipline and consistency are two terms I use in everything that I do. If you're disciplined and consistent, I think that's going to take you a lot farther than talent will at this point. I mean, if you're that structured, you're doing the right thing, trying to improve yourself and helping other people get better. I think, again, the sky's the limit, both personally and professionally, to really live the life that you want and achieve the goals that you have at that point. So.
Well, yeah. I'm a firm believer in that we tend as people not to do nearly as much internal analysis or looking at ourselves daily as we should. We just let things go on. We don't really look at things and going, well, what worked today? What didn't work? And why didn't it work? And we got to get away from this idea. And I know that's not what you're saying, but of failure. You know, if you fail, did you really fail? Or is it, and it's the better way to view it, a learning experience that helps you move forward? And we just don't do that. We don't do enough self-analysis of a lot of things that we do.
Yeah, and I look at that. I look at any failure as an opportunity, right? Mistakes, I call them opportunities. I say that with my organizations when we're doing change management. Yeah, I mean, you know, we have a mess, but it's an opportunity to get things better and to get things put in place or improve. And it's the same thing with personal growth. It's like, yeah, I mean, you made a mistake, you learned something. What did you learn, and how do you improve from it? And I think if you're looking at that through that lens, again, I mean, I think that yes, you are going to continue to improve and get better throughout life. And it's just one of those things. We all have life lessons, and sometimes they're hard to learn, but at the same time, there's always opportunity to do things differently, to tweak, to modify, and to improve from any of those lessons. I completely agree with you, Michael.
One of the things that I've learned is to stop saying to myself, I'm my own worst critic. I listen to every speech that I give, and I do that because I want to see how I'm doing. And if I can't listen to myself and learn, then no one else is going to be able to help. And I've learned that rather than saying I'm my own worst critic, I really should say and do say I'm my own best teacher, because really I'm going to be my best teacher and the only person who really deep down can teach me. Other people can impart information, but I need to be the one to be taught and learn. So I've learned that one of the things that I need to view myself as doing when I am listening to speeches and so on that I give is it's a learning experience. And that is because I'm my own best teacher, which I think is a whole lot more positive anyway.
Yeah. And I do a lot of self-reflection, a lot of meditation, and looking at different scenarios and saying, okay, how could I have handled this or this? Pull the emotion out of most of the things I do now. I don't make decisions based on emotion. I mean, you know, those are things you learn through life experience and just continuing to look at ways to get better. And I think, yeah, I mean, again, I like what you're saying about that and listening to yourself speak. I can't say I never listen to myself speak. I should probably start doing that now. That's a good piece of advice for me. So,
well, I remember when I was program director at our campus radio station at UC Irvine, I wanted people to hear themselves because I wanted people to improve. And some of the DJs were really not very good. There were a few who were, but even so, most could use improvement. And I heard them, but they never heard themselves. And I asked them to record their own shows, and they wouldn't. So we did it for them, essentially without their knowledge. And all we needed to record was them talking. We didn't need to record the music. But at the end of every week, we gave them a cassette and said, you need to listen to this because you have to hear what you sound like. You're going to be able to figure that out. And you know what? People really dramatically improved who listened.
Yeah, and working in the call center, I mean, with the quality assurance, when they say that the calls may be recorded, they actually do record those calls, and the QA will pull you into a room and you listen to calls, and they're going to dissect it and tell you where you need to get better. So yeah, very similar process. I mean, I've been through that when I was a call center rep back in 2020 years ago at this point. So yeah, no, absolutely. And I can appreciate that whole dynamic, because that is how you get. And again, I think you have to accept, that's another thing, accept criticism, be open to feedback in order to evolve at that point. So
sure, it makes perfect sense to do that. So you just published your HR professional career. It just got published in July, right?
Yeah, yes, sir. We published it in July. I wrote it last November, and we've kind of been tweaking it and putting the finite details on it. And we just published it. I think it was like July 18th, July 20th, when we launched that book on Amazon. And so very happy about it. Happy to have it. It's the third book I published, which is fantastic. And it, really kind of dissects not only my journey through HR consulting and building a consulting firm, but also kind of gives you a little bit of backstory on why I do what I do, how I got involved in it, and just kind of looking for opportunities outside of just HR consulting. So it's kind of a well-rounded book. I think the feedback I've gotten from people, as they've read it and want to get into HR consulting, there's things they never thought about. So it's a great read. There's resources in there to kind of give you places to write things out and take notes and kind of put your own goals and objectives down, and kind of what like action item type lists that are throughout the book. But yeah, no, it's great. I didn't think I'd ever get this third one out, and was able to write it in 3 weeks, and then we published it in July. And I'm happy that the team got it out and worked with me and kind of stuck through it to the bitter end at this point. So
what's the next one going to be? Do we know yet?
I haven't even thought that far ahead. The first two were about student loan repayment. The third one was consulting. Probably something about, who knows? Maybe I'll do a bio on myself. I don't know. I mean, maybe the next one will be about some of the scenarios and HR craziness that I deal with. I mean, you get a little bit of that in the consulting book, but there's probably some case study type of role playing events and just different scenarios I can run through just from my own personal 20-year career that would probably be a great training resource for people that want to get into HR. So
do you have a story you could tell about some of the craziness of HR, or would that be giving something away you don't want to do?
Yeah, a lot of it, I could probably get on a roll and talk about certain things. I don't want to say, you don't want to reveal too much for the confidentiality, but
no, I understand.
Yeah, so and a lot of it, again, it's opportunities to evolve processes. It's opportunities to watch organizations be successful, pinpoint weaknesses, and really kind of show the process of getting better. And, really in my career early on, I had the opportunity to work with some really strong consultants that came in. We had a $20 million loss company. We were able to turn around. I worked very closely with them as a new HR professional. Had the opportunity to work in a bankrupt paper company at one point. So I've worked in very challenging and tough environments. I think that have prepared me for the challenges and opportunities that I deal with every day, because I've seen some of it. I mean, not all of it. I say I learn something new probably every day in this field. But, again, I think that it is change management is difficult, whether it's operations or HR or finance. There's always room for improvement, but you got to be real. I think you've got to have thick skin to get in there and kind of exploit weaknesses and really evolve organizations. It's not easy. So
good point about having a thick skin. Definitely more people need to have a little bit more of that. But I'm assuming you have had situations where you've had a particular individual who was a problem in one way or another that you were able to turn around and help them become, and as a result, their company become more successful?
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think one of the stories I wrote about an executive director at a nonprofit, and really when I started with them, I happened to be, it was an organization in New York. I happened to be down in Texas at the time, or really got into it. And I was in Texas for a month, and the place was really struggling. And, I get up early in the morning and swim. I was thinking about how am I going to fix this thing every night. And again, I had a couple of scenarios. I mean, it was like, okay, I coach the executive director, manage the individual to success. I terminate and replace, or I go in and run the facility myself until we replace. And again, when I came back to New York, I had a very I think, a very direct conversation and just said, look, you got to step up or you got to go. I mean, and again, I had a conversation with the board of directors, as board president as well. Like, this isn't going to work. We're going to have to look at replacing at this point if the person does not buy into this process. And really, over the past, I would say 12 to 18 months, 100% turnaround. Person is in a much better place as a leader. And I mean, drastic improvement in an organization. I can say that's probably one of my success stories that comes up off the top of my head. Great retention of employees. You still have turnover, obviously, but I mean, again, it's completely different. And I got to give the person all the credit for buying in and working with me and really going through some challenges and again, really leveling up in their career and their professional life as well. So,
yeah, it does get to be a situation where sometimes things have to get really bad before somebody recognizes it and improves. And I guess that's part of human nature, that sometimes it just has to really go far downhill before it can start going back up.
Yeah. When I talk to clients, first thing I say when they bring me in, and look, a lot of times, Michael, I'm brought in at times to replace HR professionals or fix HR departments. And I say, look, we're going to have, I call them wins and losses, right? We're going to have good days and we're going to have bad days, and we're going to have good weeks. We're going to have bad months. I mean, so I mean, again, like, you're going to have ups and downs. It's kind of a roller coaster at this point. And so you've got to be prepared to take that punch as an organization and just rebound from it and recover. I mean, so those are things that I see all the time. And how do we continue to, to reinforce that? And then I said that to a new client as we're bringing a new HR person on. We recruited, we were able to fill the job very quickly, but I go, look, we're still going to have ups and downs. It's not fixed. Like, there's things that have to get done. This person's going to come in and help me fix these things, but give it time. The process, it didn't break overnight. It's not going to be fixed overnight either. So
it's all about setting expectations, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Well, you've written 2 books about student loans, so that must be a subject near and dear to your heart. Would you tell us a little bit about all of that stuff?
Yeah, again, having a number of degrees, I could talk about student loans for probably 15, 20 hours if people wanted me to. So really started out, the journey started, finished my bachelor's degree in 2007, private school in New York, had about $15,000 in student loans when I left. Decided to go back and get a master's degree at the University of Illinois. So upon graduation in December of 2011, roughly had $75,000 in student loans. And so the goal, as of January 2012, I took a job in Northern Michigan. The goal was to get it paid off in under 2 years. I mean, the $75,000, I think most people thought I was crazy. It was impossible. I was able to pay that debt off in 23 months. Fast forward to 2016, decided to go back and get an MBA at Syracuse University, finished that degree in December of 2017, graduated with $117,000 in student loan debt. Obviously, MBAs are super expensive from private schools. I paid that debt off in 33 months, and then I finished a third master's degree, roughly $40,000 borrowed there, and I was able to pay that off about 4 months after I had finished that degree. So really, overall, both books talk about my strategies, discipline, and consistencies on making payments, and just being as proactive as I can to reduce my debt. And I've continued that with my mortgage, continue that with car payments. But it's just looking at debt and how to reduce it as quickly as possible. And I know not everyone's in the same situation with me. You could have healthcare costs, you could have kids. I mean, I get all that. You live in a bigger city, I understand all that. I still think there's ways to reduce costs and reduce debt astronomically. And again, student loans impact 50 million people in this country. Yeah. You're going to have to deal with it eventually. So
what are some of the things and suggestions that you might have for people as far as getting their student debt down and relieved?
Yeah, and again, I think consolidation is always an option. You have to be careful of that. You don't want to spend money on a consolidation company, making sure the interest rates are as low as possible. It really comes down to me, need versus want, right? In life. And again, do you need it or you just want it? And again, I think you've got to look at that. Do you really need Netflix? Probably not. Do you need an iPhone every year? No, probably not. Do you need a brand new car every year? Probably not, right? I mean, so, do you need Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts every day? Can you brew your own coffee and save yourself $3, $4, $5, $6 a day? Those things add up. And I've had people on, Fox Business argue with those things. Okay, we'll multiply a $6 cup of coffee by 7 by 52. That's a bunch of money you can put towards your student loans right there. I mean, I never thought of it like that. Well, I do. I mean, so again, it's like, those are things that absolutely can impact long term. And the other thing I always tell people is always make more than a minimum payment. I don't care if it's $10 or $20 or $5. Keep that interest absolutely as low as possible from accruing, and you're hitting principal absolutely every time. I mean, and I carry that over to my mortgage. It's a 30-year loan. And again, with the mortgage, I think I paid roughly $65,000 off in 2 years. It was about a $220,000 mortgage on maybe $250,000. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I'm to the point now where it's the majority of the money is now on my payments. The big payment is going towards principal. I mean, so I've completely destroyed that interest model with my mortgage payment as well, because I've just taken it and I make additional payments every month to offset the interest at that point. And so if you look at it like that, I think you are going to look at it differently. The other thing I did with student loans originally that really upset me actually is watch the interest accrue every week. And so when I was at my max back in 2012, I think it was $100 a week accruing in interest. And I mean, I'm like, the only people making money are banks and the government. Mm-hmm. So it's like, that was it. Like I saw that, I'm like, game over, man. Like, I'm going to pay this off as quick as I can. Because I didn't want other people making money off my money at that point. And so I've taken that competitive stand with any debt I've gotten at that point. So.
And it's worked really well. So it's all about making more payments or making higher payments and not just certainly paying minimums.
Yeah. Reduce. Yeah. I mean, look at your highest interest rate, knock it down, and you continue to do that. And I think, again, people will get out of debt, set goals, reward yourself, discipline yourself, and be consistent, and you absolutely will be successful with debt, debt reduction, and really anything in life as well, like I've talked about. So yeah,
we went through some periods of that, and we had a fair amount of credit card debt just because of different things, like buying wheelchairs for my wife. She was in a chair her whole life, so buying power chairs that she needed that insurance didn't cover, and so we had some pretty hefty credit card bills. But she worked really hard we both did, but she did most of the financial management. She worked really hard to make higher than minimum payments by far, to the extent that she was able to pay everything completely down. So now the only credit card debt we have is what we have in any given month. And she has passed away, so it's now just me. And the next step that I took was that every month, the entire bill from the previous month is automatically paid. So I've set it so that will automatically happen. So we don't have any credit card debt, which I'm really happy about. Of course, the banks are always sending me nice, lovely invitations to open a new credit card or do other things with our credit cards. And even our mortgage company wants us to take out an equity loan. Very nice and generous of them.
Yeah, I got an ad like that the other day from my mortgage company as well. I'm like, oh, this must be the new one. Yeah, I get. Well, what I get now with my credit card companies is, roll over a balance, you get at 0% interest for 12 or 24 months.
Yeah.
So I get those, constantly in email and in the mail. But I did see the home equity. First time I've seen a home equity email like that ever. I'm like, oh, okay, this is a new one, I guess I'm going to get. So yeah, I don't need it, right? I try to pay for everything in cash, obviously put as much towards retirement when I can. And just keep cost as low as I possibly can and live I would say an economically, I don't want to say frugal, but just, I guess a balanced life. The best way to put it. So,
well, yeah, and I know for me, we've worked and when Karen was alive, we both worked really hard at it, but we worked to, as I said, keep all the payments down and don't spend a lot of money that I need to. I do use the credit card for some expenses again, but they get paid off at the end of the month, which is the big important part. It's just easier to use the credit card because I'm not going to write checks and so using the credit card. And the other part about it is there isn't an interest charge. There is a financial charge. They still get some money, but it is not what it would be otherwise if the credit card the balances increased a great deal.
Yep. Yeah, no, same thing. I use it. I get the airline miles. I do some traveling, so it works out well for me. Same exact thing with me with American Express. So yeah, absolutely.
What I love is listening to the flight attendants on airlines. We use American a lot, and they're always talking about get the new American Airlines, whatever credit card, MasterCard or Visa card, and you'll get 70,000 bonus miles and all that. What they don't tell you in all these lovely presentations is the interest rate on the card.
Oh, yeah.
And
like 25%.
Yeah. I'm sitting there going, I would want to do that. Why? Now, I suppose the argument could be made, well, if you're paying it off every month, then you don't worry about that. But still, it's a lot of money. They definitely get it from you.
No, yeah, in one way or the other, they will. I mean, and then you've got the annual fee stuff that they'll hammer you on with certain cards too.
Yeah, so. And the American Airlines cards are one of those where there's, after the first year, there's always a fee. So, it's good not to have to do that. Well, so you wrote 2 books on student loans. Why 2? What did one not have that the second one needed to have?
Yeah, I mean, the first one, how I paid off $74,000 in 24 months, really focused on that first master's degree, and then I went back to school. And the second one's really focused on the MBA, the 117 in 33 months. And really, we kind of evolved. Slaying the Student Loan Dragon is the title for the second one. All 3 are on Amazon, if anyone's interested. But, it really goes into more detail, more specifics about the process I undertook to pay off that, huge amount of money in under 3 years. And I think it's a modified version of the first one, but it goes into much more specifics about the discipline, about the process, and also some background on looking at student loans. When you're a high school student, so there is some information on there to what to look for, the fine print, the interest rates. It definitely covers a little bit more ground, I think, than the first one did. So,
isn't this all really about fiscal discipline though? And it can be tough, but isn't that what it's really about? You've got to be disciplined enough to do it.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I mean, it's discipline and consistency. I mean, every day or every week I was making payments. I mean, so again, it's that process of just being consistent and really kind of, again, managing your money so you're able to make those payments every week and keeping that interest rate down. I mean, that's absolutely what it comes down to is fiscal responsibility and discipline. Yes,
we have a car loan. My wife had a wheelchair accessible van. We sold it back to the company that we bought it from so that it would go to somebody else in a chair who could use it. But I needed a vehicle that I could be driven around in rather than relying on other people. And so one of the things that we did with this new car loan is I make payments that are larger than the payment that is due every month on it. So it's interesting to see them get to each month, see that there's this extra like $75 or $100 on the loan. And I wonder sometimes if they really know what to do with that, or they must think I'm crazy.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that because the last vehicle I purchased was a used vehicle. I think when I turned mine and I had a $25,000 loan on the vehicle, and I was able to pay that off in about 6 or 7 months. And I calculated, I ended up paying about $193 in interest and maybe 12 cents. So it was one of those things where I just continued to hit it. Yeah. Obviously the monthly payment, but then hit it with smaller payments throughout the month to reduce the accrual of interest at that point. It's the same thing I've done with my mortgage. If you hit it with smaller payments, it's not calculating as much interest at the end of the day. So,
yeah. And that's a really good piece of advice, to make those additional small payments.
That's what they call the snowflake method when it comes to debt repayment. So,
well, you mentioned failing forward. What does that mean?
yeah, I mean, basically, I think it came back to what we were talking about, looking at mistakes as opportunities, learning lessons. I think it's that emotional intelligence component of getting through the storm, recognizing you made a mistake, recognizing that there was something that you might need to do differently, and reevaluating, and I think learning from it and moving forward and being better, growing from those experiences. That's exactly what failing forward is. And I think that if you take that approach, nobody's perfect. I think that there's always opportunity to evolve in anything we do, whether it's personally, professionally, financially, spiritually, health-wise, wellness, whatever it is. Again, looking at for those opportunities and becoming disciplined enough and consistent enough to learn from that.
It gets back to plain out and out self-analysis and being willing to look at yourself and what you're doing. And for some reason, that is just so hard for people to do. I think it's a behavior that we learn and we've been taught, and we don't necessarily learn introspection nearly as much as we should. And it's such a valuable thing, and it doesn't take a lot of time on any given day to do it. Although if you meditate and spend more time on it, that's okay. But the whole idea is to really be introspective and think about what you're doing in the course of the day. And the more of it you do, the tougher and the more developed, if you will, the mental muscle becomes, which is, I think, a very important thing.
Yeah. And again, I relate it back to one of the things I relate it back to when I talk to leadership, and they're like, these employees don't want to work. They're lazy. There's turnover. And one thing I say to people is, have you looked in the mirror and asked yourself what you're not doing? I mean, again, it's that component. Not everyone is lazy. Most people want to come to work and do a good job, and they want a fair day's wage and things like that. That's that psychological contract. But what are you not doing to disengage people or to engage? I mean, it's that simple. Like, look in the mirror and say, what can I do better as a leader? Where can I improve that's going to help this organization? And asking some of those questions to employees. Where do you see? What do I need to do? I mean, again, it's look in the mirror. I mean, it's what it comes down to is, take a deep dive into yourself and say, what can I do to get better today? I mean, and really that's what, if you improve 1% each day, it's 365% at the end of the year. That's a hell of an improvement, in my opinion. So
yeah, by any standard, and it makes sense to do it. And we all ought to try to improve and learn. I wish more would do it. We're a country today, and I know it's not just the U.S., but of course this is where we are, so it's the most visible, but we are in such a fractured world, and nobody wants to listen to anyone, and nobody wants to do anything except criticize everyone else but themselves.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's self-accountability. I mean, and again, I've made mistakes in consulting, and I'll own that. I mean, I take ownership of everything in my life. I'll look at every situation. I'll own it, and recognize that maybe I do need to get better. I mean, and I'll tell people, look, I need, there are things that I still need to work on and reflect on, and I'll share that with people during training and say, I'm absolutely not perfect. There's things I'm continuing to work on myself, and it takes, it's that emotional intelligence, that it's that next level look at life to recognize that. And once you can get into that mindset of continuous evolution, I think that society would be a whole lot better off. I think the workplace would absolutely evolve, and people would be much happier in the things they're doing in life as well. So much more peace too. So
how do you overcome challenges? I mean, you face them, needless to say. You sound like everything is perfect, but I know that you, like any of us, have challenges.
Yeah. I mean, and again, I think that it's, one thing I've done is, it's like you're put in places and you're put in storms to make you stronger, right? I mean, if you can't handle pressure, you don't want success. And so, it's one of those things where I look at every situation that puts me under pressure and stress as a growth opportunity. And what can I learn from it? How can I be effective, and how can I make a difference? And so, no, I mean, my life definitely is not perfect. Again, and there's always things to look at and do differently. And I think it's just one of those things that you do some self-reflection, you do some meditation, you're thankful for what you have, the blessings that you've been given, and just continue to move forward, take it one day at a time.
Yeah. Well, what do you think the biggest mistakes in life that people make are? That was grammatically not a very good sentence, but what do you think the biggest mistakes people have or make in human life?
I think you're listening to people's opinions. I think people get caught up in that drama, that gossip, and kind of like let them direct your life. It's your world. You shape it the way you want it. I think that they get caught up potentially, that's a big component, in my opinion, is definitely listening to people and taking advice from people that maybe haven't walked in your shoes. I think they're not learning from mistakes either. I think they continue to make the same mistakes. It's kind of the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over. So, and again, I think that emotional intelligence a lot of times is another component of just not doing that self-reflection and taking ownership. I think if more people took ownership of their own life and their own mistakes and their own responsibility, you'd see a world of difference. I mean, and again, you have a failing business. You can't blame the government. You can't blame Congress. You can't blame the president. What are you doing to make that business successful? I mean, why do you have turnover? I mean, and again, there are questions that you need to ask yourself as an individual, as a leader. I mean, and I'm relating it back to the workplace, but it works personally as well. In a bad relationship, what do you need to change at that point? I mean, those are all things people have to take a deep dive and look at and see what things can be different. So, yeah, I mean, accountability, and I think just not learning from mistakes and not growing when they need to grow. So what advice would you give to people who are listening to this going forward? I think you've got to take risks in life. That no risk, no story. I think that there's always pain and growth. I mean, you have to expect it whenever you try something new. Whenever there's a challenge, you're going to feel pain. I mean, I'm just accustomed to pain at this point, and it's just one of those things that it is what it is. And again, I think that if you start taking personal accountability and ownership of the path you're on, the sky's the limit. Set challenging goals and try to achieve those goals. And if you make mistakes and fail forward, learn from it and move on and get better. I mean, I just continue to look for those 1% improvements, be thankful for what you've got and to just focus on what you can control one day at a time.
And I don't think there's any better advice that anybody could take from this or any of the podcasts that we do. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us and going through all of this and giving us some good thoughts and good ideas. And I know I'm taking away some things from this. I haven't made little payments during the month on loans, but I may do more of that with the car, and that'll be kind of fun. So I'll have to look at that.
Yeah, get that debt paid off. That's always a good thing. So.
Yeah, well, it's a logistics issue to do too, but I will work on it, and that'll be kind of fun. Yep. Well, I want to thank you again for being here. I really appreciate it. I hope that all of you listening out there enjoyed it. Matthew, if people want to reach out to you, since you do coach and consult and among other things and so on, how do they do that?
Yeah, burrconsultingllc.com is the website. You're able to put in a request from my website. Matthew, Mathew, at burrconsultingllc.com is my email.
And Burr is Burr.
Yep, Burr, Burr, correct. Yep. LinkedIn, Matthew W. Burr, Twitter at Burr Consulting, and then I have a Facebook page as well. So contact information is pretty easy to find, and always happy to answer questions related to coaching or HR. I was happy to support anyone. So
super. Well, thanks for being here with us. Thank you all for listening. Love to hear your thoughts about today's episode. Love to hear what you think about Matthew and everything that we're doing. And of course, if there's anything you'd like to see me do differently or other guests that you'd like to see us have on, we always appreciate introductions and your support and your help with that. Wherever you're listening, please give us a 5-star rating. We value that very highly and would really be very grateful if you would give us a 5-star rating. You can reach me easily enough at Michael, MICHAELHI, at Accessibe, ACCESSIBE.com. Or go to our podcast page, www.michaelhingson.com/podcast, and listen to our podcast there or wherever you want to listen to podcasts or watch us on YouTube. But please give us those ratings. We appreciate it. And again, one last time, Matthew, I really appreciate your time and value all the insights and information that you've given us today. So thank you very much.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for appreciate you having me on, and always a pleasure to be on a podcast. So thank you as well. Thank you to your listeners.